Welcome to another video of how to set up the WDX-180 system on your machine in order to follow the Web Development X course. At this point, I'm here in the GitHub repository where I can see the WDX-180 repository owned by the in-tech-gration account. At this point, you must have a forked version of this repository. So under my account, if I click here on your repositories, you will see I already have forked the WDX-180. So I have this repository under my GitHub username. The next thing I want to do is follow these steps, which is I'm going to set up SSH keys for use with GitHub. Then I'm going to download this repository, the forked version, on my computer, run some installation commands in order to be able to use some utility functions, update the progress tasks, and then push or upload my changes to GitHub. So we're going to go through these steps. Now, the first step is to set up SSH keys. Before cloning, or in order to clone this repository locally on our machine, we have to go to this green button here which says code, and then use one of these three methods to clone the repository. So we have the HTTPS method, which is available, but in order to follow this course, we must have SSH keys available to us. So the preferred method of using GitHub and connecting is SSH. Now, if I go to SSH, you will see there's a warning here. It states you don't have any public SSH keys in your GitHub account. You can add a new public key or try cloning this repository via HTTPS. So at this point, we can either use HTTPS to clone the repository or set up our SSH keys and then be able to clone this repository using SSH, which is the preferred way. So let me click this link and try to add a new SSH key. So I will say GitHub SSH key, give it a title, and then click on add SSH key. You will see that I'm leaving this text area empty. Now, if I try to add an SSH key, I will be redirected to this page which states that the key is invalid. You must supply a key in OpenSSH public key format. This is because I didn't paste anything in that text area before. In order to proceed, I have to generate an SSH key and then copy the public key into that text area. So here in this page, under the side, the menu SSH and GPG keys, there's a link to this page, which is a guide on how to generate SSH keys. So let me click this and go through the steps. In this page, we have a lot of different pages that will guide us into different into the process of setting up SSH keys and testing our connection and working with passphrases and other stuff. For this video, I'm going to just focus on generating a new SSH key. So I'm going to click this page, and then we have three ways to set up and generate an SSH key depending on our operating system. We can follow either the Linux, Windows, or Mac guide. For this one, I'm using a Mac, so I'm going to stick with Mac. So let me scroll down. The first section is about generating a new SSH key. So I'm going to open a terminal. For this one, I'm going to use VS Code. So I'm going to go to a VS Code right here, open a terminal, and I'm going to use the terminal that is found inside VS Code. So let me grab this command carefully. I will copy this command. I will paste it here in my terminal. I'm not pressing enter. I'm going to replace this with my email address and press enter. Then I will see a message generating public private key pairs. Enter a file in which to save the key. Now, for most of the times, we want to just press enter to accept the default place here where the SSH key pair will be stored. So I'm pressing enter. And for the passphrase, we probably want to pass a kind of like strong passphrase. For this one, I'm just going to press enter twice. And then you will see a message stating that my public key has been saved in this folder. and it's to be found in a file called id underscore ed 25 519.pub. So I have created my public key. Let me go to see what is the next step. So I'm just going to scroll down and then on to the next step, adding your SSH key to the SSH agent. So I'm going to copy this command, go back to my terminal. Let me clear the console and paste the command. So this is the command. It has executed successfully. I can see the agent process ID. Okay. And then in here it says that I have to check whether there's a SSH config file. There's this home directory. The tiled character denotes the home directory on my computer. Then there's a folder SSH, and then there's a config file. Now I can run these commands to see whether this file exists. If it doesn't exist, I can create it. In my case, I already have this file. So I will go to the Finder window, and this is where I can see the folder. This is the ssh.ssh folder, and there's this config file. I'm going to open this file using a text editor. So I'm going to open it with text edit and bring it to focus. So there's some information already here. If you don't have this file on your machine, under this folder, you should create this file. Since I already have this file, I'm just going to skip the creation step. And then I'm going to go to the next step, which says that I should copy and paste this information in my config file. So I'm just going to copy this information, go to the config file, and in a new line, I will paste the information and hit Control or Command Save to save this file. So now this information has been saved in this file. Let me go to the next steps. Then there's another command I should run, which is to add my key in the Apple keychain. This is a Mac thing, so if you're on Windows or Linux, you probably don't need to run this step. I'm just going to run this command. Everything seems to be working fine. And now I have completed the steps. I'm not going to continue on the next steps, which is to set up an SSH key for a hardware security key. Up to this point, I am fine. So now that I have an SSH key, I will go back to my settings. So let me go to my GitHub, go in my profile and settings, and then go to the SSH menu here. And now I'm going to add a new SSH key. Since I created the SSH key on my machine, I will write a title here for this SSH key. And now I need to paste something here. The content for this public key is found in my SSH folder. So I will go back to this folder, and I will see that there are two new files created. When I generated the keys, the key pair, two new files were created, the ID and the ID.pub. The ID is your private key. This is something that you should never ever share with anybody. But this is the public key, which is something you can share with other parties. So I'm going to open this ID.pub with a text editor. This is a text file. And in here, I can see the public key. So this is my public key, and this is something that I can share with other parties, third parties. So I'm going to copy this and go back to my GitHub page and paste this public key right here. So create, give it a title, leave the key type to authentication key, and then paste the public key, never the private key. This is important. And then I'm going to add SSH key. Now you will see my GitHub SSH key here. And if everything worked correctly up to this point, then if I go back to my repositories and then select the WDX forked repository and go to code and you will see that the warning message is no longer here. You can see that I can now use SSH to clone my repository. This means that I have successfully completed all the steps, and now I can use SSH to connect with GitHub. This is great. Let me copy this URL, and now I'm ready to copy, to clone, and download the repository on my machine. I will go back to my VS Code, and here in my terminal, I will just go to some folder that I keep for my temporary tests, and then clear the terminal, and I will run the command git clone and paste the URL that I have just copied from GitHub. So git clone to create a clone, to create a copy on my local machine from this URL. At this point, you should be careful that this is your GitHub username and this is not integration. Let me press enter. This is has just started to clone the repository. Once the repository has been downloaded, I can change the directory to that folder and then press ls to list the files, and you will see all the files and folders that are found. I now have a local copy of my repository, of my forked repository. This is great. The next step would be to add this folder in my VS Code workspace, so I can see it here in the File Explorer, either on the right or on the left side, depending on your configuration. So I'm going to go to File, Add Folder to Workspace, and then I'm going to try to find the WDX folder. I can see it right here. This is the folder that I just cloned. I am going to add this, and I can also see the contents of the files and folders right here. This is great. The next step is to save this workspace so that I can open this workspace from time to time and be able to see this workspace and start working on my repository. So the next step would be to go to File, Save Workspace As, and then in some folder, I'm going to save this as WDX code workspace. I already have the code workspace, so I'm going to replace this file. And now I have my workspace created and saved. I'm going to clear the console and move on to the next step. So we have successfully completed this step. Let me go back to my steps. So we have set up SSH keys, we have added this public key on GitHub, we have cloned successfully, and then the next two steps are these two commands that we just need to run once in order to be able to run some utility functions from time to time when we are working locally in our repository. So in order to run these commands, I will have to go to my VS Code again, and then from the root directory, from the WDX-180, I'm going to run the npm install, or npm I for short. It's going to install some dependencies, and the next installation would be under the tools directory, so I need to change and go to the tools directory and run the npm I or npm install in that folder also. It's going to run the installation. Everything looks okay. No errors, no warnings, so it's fine. Now I can use some tools that are available in my repository. Let's go to the next step, which is to update the progress sheet with some of the tasks that I have completed. For example, in this session, I'm going to update some of the tasks about setting up GitHub or forking the repository. So let's go and see how you want to update your tasks. Now, the daily tasks should be updated in this folder inside the user and inside the subfolders week 1, week 2, and so forth. So for this one, I'm going to open week 1, and I'm going to go under the directory progress. I will also show you this folder under the Finder. So if I go here under the WDX, under the user, under week 1, you will see there's a progress, and then there are these files. So these are 6 files, each one corresponding to a different day of the week. So we have a progress CSV file for week 1, day 1. day 2, day 3, day 4, and we also have like one progress sheet for the weekend. Now for this one, I'm going to just update the progress file for week 1, day 1. Before updating these files, I need to create a copy of them. So whenever you start your day or your week, you want to create a copy of this file and then rename this and start updating the progress. So I'm going to start with a file called progress.draft.w01, which is week 1, day 1 CSV. So I'm going to create a copy of this file, and then I need to rename this file. And no, this is not what I want to do. I want to click here and rename this. So for the renaming part, you need to remove the .draft from the name. So the copy should not have the .draft. So it's just progress.week1, day 1. And then since I created a copy and the copy added an additional 2 here, I'm just going to remove this. So let me recap this. I'm going to copy the name. Now in here, you should have like file progress draft, and the copy should be progress without the .draft. So you should rename these files. You should create a copy. Don't rename just the original files. You should copy these files and then rename them. So you'll have two files, the draft version and your own copy. So this is the file. Now, if I go back here and I clear the console and I run git status, you will see that Git will inform me that there's a new file, a new untracked file under user week 1 progress CSV, which is correct because I just created a new file. Now I'm going to open up this file. So this is the file. I'm going to toggle and hide the panels so I can easily work on this file. So there are multiple ways actually to update the CSV file. One is that you can open it in VS Code and start editing. This is a plain text file. And this is what we're going to go through this session. Now, initially, when you open up the CSV file, you will see that VS Code has automatically enabled wrapping. So when a line is more than, let's say, 80 characters long, it will wrap to the next line. Now, there are two ways to remove this like wrapping and be able to see the CSV files in full length. One is to open the command palette. So I'm going to go and open up the command palette and then search for view toggle wrap. So I'm going to click on view toggle word wrap to disable the word wrap. And now I can see its line spanning the whole width of the screen. So there's no wrapping, and it's actually pretty much easy this way to read and update the progress sheet. So for this one, let's say that I just watched the Understanding CSV Files video, and I'm now familiar with the CSV files, and I'm ready to update this task. So I will go here and I will go to the last column, which is the blue column here. And it says like update false to true in the completed column. This is the instruction on how to update this task this particular row. So if I just watch the video, I can change the false to true. And let's say that I also watched what is markdown from here. So I'm going to also switch from false to true. This is like the instruction on how to update a particular row. You will see that different rows have different like instructions on how to update your progress. So let's update just these two lines and open up my terminal. There's a shortcut for toggling the terminal. You can find this shortcut under terminal, and then you will see there's some shortcuts. For Mac is Command J. For Windows, I think it's Control J. So let me clear and do a git status. Now I have this file which is untracked, so I want to say to Git, please start tracking, start watching this file for changes. So I'm going to say git add, and then I'm already in the tools directory. That's why I can see this sub directory here. So I'm going to go back to the parent directory, the WDX-180. Let me clear git status, and then we have user. So let me stage this file, user week 1. So it's git add, sorry, week 1, then progress CSV. So now I'm staging and I'm saying to Git, hey, track this file. I'm going to run the git add command and then git status to see what's happening now. You will see that Git has just started watching this file, and it says that I can now commit these changes and save these changes into the Git history. I'm going to do that by running the git add command. Once again, use uh, I can use the git commit command. Sorry, not add. I already added. So git commit with a message, and let's say updated progress for a week 1, day 1. So here's my commit message. I'm going to press enter, run a git status to see what's happening. Okay, ready. My changes are committed. There are states, they're committed. And now I can upload to my online Git repository. So if I go to my forked repository on GitHub and open up the user folder, you will see that my changes under week 1 progress are not to be found here. That's because all the changes I made are currently locally found locally in my computer. So I need to upload these changes to the GitHub repository so that they're reflected on my remote repository. So in order to do that, I need to run git push. After I have run git add and git commit, I can just run git push to upload these changes. And if I have set up my SSH keys correctly, I will be able to see this message that everything executed successfully. If I run git status now, I should be seeing this nice message, nothing to commit, working tree clean. So this is an OK message, which means that all these changes are now to be found on the online GitHub repository. So if I now go here and I refresh, I should be seeing my progress file along with the changes on the first 2 columns. Which brings me up to the second way that you can update your progress sheet, which is directly through your forked GitHub repository. So if you go to this repository page and you can see your progress CSV file, you can click on this edit button here, and then you will see this CSV file. And let's update also another row. So for example, let's go to this task, which states that we need to fork the WDX repository. And once we have completed this task, we should change this to true. And then here at the last column, we just need to paste the forked repository URL. So this is my forked repository URL. I'm going to copy this and paste it here. So GitHub, your username, WDX-180. And I also have a GitHub pages, which is the next task. And if I go here and I change this to username.github.io WDX180, you will see my GitHub page. I can copy the URL and then go back here and change this to this one. Okay, so I have updated these 2 rows. I can commit my changes. I will say update progress here. Let's say dating week 1, day 1 with repo and pages, let's say some description, commit changes, and now I have my changes reflected here. At this point, it's important to note that when you're changing something on your Git repository locally, you are only changing things on your computer. So you need to push in order to upload your changes to sync your local changes with the GitHub repository. And when you're changing things through your GitHub repository, you need to download these changes and see these changes reflected locally on your computer. So now these changes that I made through GitHub are found only here on my GitHub repository and not locally. I can check this. If I go here, you will see that my file here does not contain these two updated lines. They're still the old version. So I need to download the changes from the GitHub repository so that they're reflected here on my local computer. In order to do that, I need to run the git pull command to download the changes. And now I will see git status. Let me see. Let me open up this file again and toggle wrap off. And I can see that these two rows have been updated. You can see true with a GitHub URL. And then there's also this uh, uh, row, which is of course not correct because I have already completed the task, but I haven't changed this to true. So I will need to update this. Now you can see I have my changes here. You can see here, I'm seeing here in VS Code that I have this line changed. Let's run a git status. I will see that I have some changes that need to be staged because the file that Git is tracking has changed. Let me add this file again. Now, since there is this only one file that has been modified under the user folder, if I run git add user, I will update this file. I don't need to write the full path. But be careful because if there are other files that need to be staged, you probably need to provide the full path. In this case, there's only a single file, so I can run git add user. Let's run git status again. Now I need to commit, so git commit with a message updated, let's say week 1, day 1 with true or something like that. And then I need to push so I can upload these changes on my GitHub repository. Everything is okay, so I have my changes here. Now let me go here and close this file and update it and open it up. Okay, seems that for some reason VS Code is not updating the file right here, but I can open it and see that everything is okay. Now we'll go to GitHub and check if this here has been updated. So I'm going to go on this page, refresh, and indeed this has been updated. So this is how you can update your progress through the CSV files found under the user folder, and how you can push and upload your changes to GitHub. If you have any questions, please send us a comment on this video. Thank you for watching.